Hello, 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 and good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. This is the Beauty in Us Radio, right here on Awesome God Radio. I am your host, Nelson E. Brown, and I want to thank you all for tuning into a new show, a brand new show. We have started a brand new month. It's November, so the year is almost over. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus for the past month, and I wanted to come back with a brand new show. I wanted to come back with something new and exciting, and it's most appropriate now because it's a brand new month. We are. I will be attending an event with Journey to Josiah on Saturday, November 5th, from 6 to 10 p.m. He is putting on a performance. The CEO and founder, Mr. David Marshall, whom we've had on the show earlier this year, is putting on a performance, a gala celebration of National Adoption Awareness Month. And this event will include guest speakers and performers. And I encourage you all to watch Mr. Marshall as he performs on Saturday. So that's the event that I will be attending. Everyone who celebrates adoption, whether you're a parent, whether you are an adopted child, whether you're a part of that community in any and every way, this is the event for you. So I'm very excited to attend the event on Saturday. So I wanted to share that with you all since Mr. Marshall has been on our show and has provided awesome insight into his journey as an adoptive father and the connections he's made and so forth. So I wanted to acknowledge that. And I wanted to introduce to the show Councilwoman Odette Ramos. She represents the 14th District of the City Council for the City of Baltimore and for the residents. So she agreed to speak with me this evening, and she also agreed to talk about her work as a councilwoman, for her district. And the last time I spoke about District 14 was back in 2020, right before the former councilwoman, Mary Pat Clark, retired. So, Councilwoman Ramos, thanks again for agreeing to appear on my show to talk about the work that you do in the council and for the committees that you are a part of. So I wanted to speak with you about your work on the city council because I'm wrapping up my undergraduate education at UMBC. I study sociology at UMBC, and I will also be getting a certificate in the social dimensions of health. But prior to that, I've had the chance to get my associate's degree, and in my studies I've learned a lot about politics and in sociology in different dimensions. So I've learned about the sociology of law, health, policy, environmental policy, business, and in different aspects. So I've learned a lot because I even have an internship with Senator Cardin's office now, and I've learned a lot about the realm that you guys are a part of on a daily basis. I've gotten a taste of that so far, and prior to that, I've had experience with the Department of the Environment for the state of Maryland at the state level, and also through the private sector through Civic Works at MedStar Good Samaritan Hospital, learning about geriatrics as well as pediatrics with the state. So I've been using that experience and my credentials to make the best out of my experiences.
That's
and
great.
I have a lot of my classmates who want to learn more about what it's like being in public office. And because I do have classmates and even some other interns that I work with who are in law school and who want to pursue a career either in law or in politics or in public service of some sort. And I think it would be best for someone who's already doing that at the local level to really speak about that experience because you're still kind of new to the office. A couple of years. You've been in office for a couple of years, and you've gotten acclimated throughout the course of the pandemic to being in office because you came right in the middle of the pandemic.
Right.
So could you tell us a little bit about your work? Well, first about yourself and what inspired you to really run for office for the 14th district?
Well, first, I want to thank you for having me on your show, and I apologize that I'm in my car. I'm going in between meetings, and so I do apologize that I'm not set up in a studio and all of that. But if you can hear me okay, then this will work out. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here. Yes, I've been on the city council now for 2 years, but I've been in Baltimore for 30 years, going on 31. And during that time that I've been here, have been really involved in community organizing. I also worked for Senator Mikulski and Delegate Maggie McIntosh and my predecessor, Mary Pat Clark. I was very involved in my community. I'm one of the founders of the Village Learning Place and also the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance, and then was a small business owner for a while. And my last job was the executive director of the Community Development Network, where I did a lot of work statewide around addressing affordable housing, making sure that people can stay in their homes, and then also addressing vacant property. So I came to this work as a council member with a lot of experience and an agenda. I knew what I needed to accomplish because I could not accomplish it as an advocate. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity and for the voters of the 14th district to give me a chance to do this work. I was also obviously trained by the best. Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark was in office for about 40 years, and she was not one of those that just won because of her name. She was well regarded, and she did the work very well. And I strive every day to be able to be as good as she was. So, that's kind of what got me here and got me to run. And I've been really, really excited to work with my colleagues on really important legislation. We passed legislation to create payment plans for paying your taxes, which will be implemented in January. We passed legislation to create an independent office of the Inspector General, so there isn't elected officials on the board of the Inspector General's office. We've created lots of opportunities to address vacant and abandoned properties and pushing hard to make sure that this is a priority in our city because it has been a crisis for so long. No longer should we have residents living next to vacant properties and they can't get homeowners insurance to address the damage in their properties. So it's a huge priority for me, and I've been really grateful to work on these issues with my colleagues.
Yes, and thanks again, for the work that you do. I know it hasn't been easy, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic has put a damper on a lot of things, for a lot of the residents in the city of Baltimore, not just in your district, but throughout the city. And I know that, you were elected into office right in the middle of the pandemic. So what was it like going through the process for the very first time in the middle of a global pandemic? Because I'm familiar with District 14 and some of the neighborhoods, and I know people who live and work in those neighborhoods. What was the challenge in terms of how could you identify the resources that, in order to meet the needs for the residents in the community once you were elected for the first time? Because since it's your first time in office, oftentimes it can be really difficult to really find your way when you're first starting out in office. So could you tell us a little bit about what the challenges were in terms of identifying the resources in order to meet the needs for the residents during that time, and how it led you to where you are now?
Sure. Well, it started actually when we shut down in March of 2020, was just a few weeks before the primary. And so I ended up calling everybody and checking on all of the, particularly elders who I knew, many isolated, many scared, to make sure that they were okay. And then some of that information was able to have with me as we, transitioned into a new office. I was also really, really fortunate. I was able to keep one of Councilwoman Clark's staff members, Cindy Leahy, who had been with Councilwoman Clark for about 13 years. So she knew the lay of the land. She knew who to contact. And I also was able to get a staff member who's my legislative director, Gabe, who used to work for one of my other colleagues. And so, I was really ahead of the game because I had 2 staff members. I have 3 total that were already in there and could lead, and let me know where to go from there. I also have done a lot of advocacy in City Hall. I was one of the founders of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and did some, advocacy on the funding source. So I kind of knew how things were going. Also, Council President Mosby did a great job of making sure that the 5 new members were oriented prior to even being sworn in. They did a in-depth orientation on the budget and how who the budget, the bill drafters are and all of that. And part of it is trial by fire in terms of, you want to get certain things done. I had introduced a couple of bills and then I had to withdraw them because it's not something that we could do. So, I'm learning every day. I know more about the pipes underground than I think any of us, but I'm on 3 committees. One of them is public safety, and I'm not quite sure why I'm there, but I am learning a lot. And of course, public safety being one of the biggest issues in our city. I also serve on the Economic and Community Development Committee, and I serve on the Rules Committee. Also, all of the members who came back were really amazing to help the 5 new members get acclimated. They answered our questions. They helped us with, dynamics and planning. When we had difficult bills, how to get through, the voting process and all of that. So, I'm really grateful for them. But I also came in with an agenda. I knew what I was trying to do. So I had a purpose and I knew, what I wanted to get done. And then I was able to ask for help. That's the other thing. That's the other big thing is I ask a lot of questions. And I encourage everybody else to just ask questions, take people's time to get the answers, because that really helped me get acclimated. I just wasn't going to assume that I knew. And I still have a lot of questions every time we have hearings and budget and all of that, because it is that important to our residents that we know exactly what's going on and how we can then articulate what's going on to our residents. So I ask a lot of questions and take a lot of people's times to get the questions answered. And my colleagues, I think, do appreciate that because they are full of knowledge and are really helpful. But also sometimes, they get the answers that they need as well. So it has definitely been challenging. The first year and a few months, we were all virtual. So we had virtual hearings, we had virtual meetings. The biggest challenge there was that, my daughter was in 3rd grade at the time. And so she also had virtual school. So I can't tell you the amount of times I'm trying to say something profound in a hearing and she's running in saying something else. And I think we all had to deal with those kinds of situations, right? So, that was definitely difficult, but we got through it, and I'm grateful to be able to have the opportunity to say, we got through it and we learned a lot from it. One of the big things that the City Council learned was that more residents were participating in our hearings because they could participate from home. They did not need to come all the way down to City Hall and find parking and all of that. So now that we're back in City Hall, we came in to have in person on April 4th. We are now doing hybrid hearings. So people can still testify from home or your work. And we can still get their responses. We also encourage people to come to City Hall. It's a wonderful building. It's the oldest continually in use City Hall in the nation. It's about 200 years old, and it's just a beautiful building, and it has a lot of history there, both good and bad, as you know. And so, we always encourage people to come, but you can testify now hybrid. So that was one of the big lessons as well. So it's been definitely a journey. I've been learning a lot.
Yes, absolutely. So I wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the neighborhoods that you represent. I give a shout out to several of the neighborhoods at the ticker that's at the bottom of the screen. So could you tell us a little bit about the neighborhoods that you represent? Because what I've learned from not just, Mary Pat Clark, but also from many of your other colleagues, I know that every neighborhood has different needs. and
Mhm.
every neighborhood needs specific resources in order to meet those needs. And my experience, with my internships and with my what I've been studying in college, and even through opportunities that I've had, to network with people who live and who work in the city of Baltimore and who are doing great work in the community, I'm able to recognize more and more and learn about it more and more what the needs are for each community, because I know that each district is different, not just the communities themselves, but also the people. So could you tell us a little bit about the neighborhoods that you represent in the 14th district? Because I've learned I'm not a city person. I live in working. I've worked in the city, but I live in Baltimore County. So I've learned a lot about the city of Baltimore through my connections and through my conversations with people who work in the city. So could you tell us a little bit about the 14th district in terms of what the neighborhoods look like and what kind of resources you've been able to use during your time in office to really meet the needs for the community? Because, like I said, I know that the resources can differ depending on where you are. Um, so could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure thing. So I represent 14th district. It's basically north central Baltimore. I represent from basically Falls Road over to Harford Road and Clifton Park. So Clifton Park boundaries Bel Air Road. So it's a very long district. So the neighborhoods include Hamden, Hose Heights, parts of Roland Park, not all of it, Remington, Charles Village, Able, Oakenshaw, Guilford, and Ednor Gardens, Waverly, Better Waverly, Coldstream Homestead, Montebello, Darley Park, and the Lake Montebello area, and Clifton Park. And it's very diverse. I mean, Guilford is where you get the large houses and mansions, very high incomes there. And Darley Park and Coldstream Homestead Montebello are exactly opposite. We have a lot of vacant properties, a lot of elders aging in place, but in deteriorating homes, and poverty. So we have diversity. We have, Hamden being a traditionally very white neighborhood, and Ednor Gardens being a traditionally Black neighborhood, and Coldstream Homestead Montebello. So each has its various challenges, but each is really amazing. Every single neighborhood that I represent, I am so blessed to represent such a great district, because every neighborhood is active. There's an active community association or active neighbors that really want to be involved and stay involved. They're my eyes and ears on the street. And that's not always the case in other places. They are very much passionate and committed to the city and to their neighborhoods. So it's really great to have so many great neighborhoods. I'm sitting here in the neighborhood called Wyman Park over by the Stony Run. Um, so each has its own blessings and assets, and each has its own challenges. And so our role in the District 14 office is to make sure that we're addressing both the immediate needs, like, there's illegal dumping, or there's permits haven't been pulled for construction being done, or traffic calming is a huge issue in my district. And then balancing that with really trying to address the big issues. I don't have the most vacant properties in my district, but I know how important this crisis is, and I am acting on it with my colleagues citywide. We have a new system called INREM that I worked on in my previous job and brought to Baltimore, where we can foreclose on vacant properties when the liens get higher than the value of the property, which is most of the vacant properties. That way, the city takes possession and works with communities about what we want to see with those properties, and working with partners to rehab them immediately. We have to get this done. We need a lot of money to do it, and the systems to make it happen. So we are moving forward on that. The goal is 1,000 properties a year going through this process, and the mayor's office and DHCD are right on board doing that. So it's a balance between making sure that we're addressing the immediate needs of our district, but also working on these citywide issues. And that is one of the challenges. We also have a major flood area on Hillen and 35th Street. And we do have the attention of the Department of Public Works and others to address that issue. This is a decades-long issue where the water gets above the stop sign. And residents have been dealing with for decades, and now we're finally getting to it because we have, advocacy, and we also have a mayor's office who's willing to work, make it happen. So, we have vacant properties in one area, and then we have, there's been some property crimes in other areas. We've had some violent crime, but mostly not as much as in other areas of the city. So we have some diverse, issues that, we try to address. A lot of people care about our trees, and so we have a lot of tree requests as well, which I think is great. And we have 7, 8, 9 schools in the district. I also have, 10 bookstores in the district, and that's, so they're all different kinds of great assets. I mean, City College, which is the oldest high school in the state. So, we've got a lot going on, but we have our challenges. And so we try to address them. Today I was at a safety meeting, and so we bring in the major and work with the residents on what, some of the strategies need to be able to address those issues. So our role is really to make those connections with city agencies and with other partners so that, some of these issues get done. Your water bill's messed up, give us a call. We'll try to address it with Department of Public Works. You've got illegal dumping next door. We'll try to address that as well. So it's been fun. There's a lot of different things that we get to work on. It is never dull, never.
Yes, and I thank you for sharing that experience. I was going to ask you about, because I know that the real estate market in the city of Baltimore has been a hot topic for the past several months in terms of, the housing being a problem for a lot of the residents and a lot of these people, not just in District 14, but also the residents throughout the city of vacant properties. That's been a huge issue for the past several months. And I've noticed, through my research and, what I've learned throughout my time in college about the history of the real estate in the city of Baltimore and how a lot of people unfortunately are leaving the city. So because I know that you're a part of the Economic and Community Development Committee on the City Council, so I'm glad that you are doing this great work because the housing issue is a huge issue. So because I know that home ownership that generates wealth, and I know that a lot of times a lot of people, the redevelopment efforts can be very challenging in neighborhoods that have been marginalized or that have been impoverished for decades. So I know that you are part of that committee. So what is your overall objective for the housing issue, for the vacant properties? Like what do you plan? What is your long-term goal in order to just revamp that? I know that you started the work that
so we've got to start many, many, many decades ago in 1911 when Mayor Preston at the time signed legislation that basically created racial segregation, right, in zoning. That was born here in Baltimore and was taken nationwide, and was actually part of lending practices that were developed through Congress. Okay. That is the reason why we have segregation in our city. And even though Mayor Preston's law obviously is not on the books anymore, we are still making choices and investments based on racist ideas. We as the city are saying the areas where, and you're probably familiar with Dr. Lawrence Brown, who wrote a book called The Black Butterfly, who articulated for all of us. I've been here for so long, and then he articulated this so well, I guess it was in 2016, that the city basically looks like the black butterfly and the white L, right? Where we have, neighbors that, a lot of areas in Baltimore City and East and West Baltimore, because of this segregation and population loss, also that's where vacant properties come in and disinvestment. But our disinvestment isn't because necessarily people left. Our disinvestment is because we're choosing to invest in along the White L. We are still doing that in the way that people say it is, well, there's no market in the black butterfly. That is incorrect and that is racist, right? Because we know that, yes, it would be very expensive to rehab a vacant property in West Baltimore if it's one in a row of vacant properties. Okay. We have to disrupt that and try to get a hold of all of those properties and be able to rehab them to bring people in, and making sure that the residents who are currently there are not displaced. Making sure that we're rehabbing their house as well, so that they can stay and age in place with dignity. So we have to really acknowledge that this equitable development is what we need, and that we need to start investing in the areas that need it most, not just because there's an area of strength first. Again, I think that's a racist notion, and which is why I continue to talk about we have to have true equitable development and start where we need it most. My colleague has in his district 5,000 vacant properties. I have 400. Where are we going to start? We need to start where we need it most. That's actually going to cost the most money. It's really, really expensive to rehab a house, particularly some of the properties in West Baltimore where they're, 3 stories and gorgeous, amazing, amazing. But we can do it. We can have those resources. We are working hard to get them, work with partners to be able to rehab them. There's a organization in West Baltimore called Parity Homes that's starting that process. And there's a lot of people wanting to start this work. What they need is the land and some subsidy. And this interim process that I described earlier will help us to get the land and the property into the hands of the people who are going to do the work that needs to be done. And again, in a way that we're not displacing residents. I do have a lot of residents who are aging in place, and we want them to age with dignity in their homes. And so making sure that we have dollars to help them with home repair, whether it's new heat, new roof, grab bars, et cetera, that is extremely important. And that's part of keeping people in their homes. One of the first things I worked on as a council person is to address this horrible predatory way that we collect our taxes, our property taxes. We Baltimore and Maryland uses tax sale. So when the lien, when you don't pay your property taxes and you're not water bill anymore, but other environmental citations, the lien is sold to an investor. The investor will come and start collecting money from you. So the city is not collecting, and they can charge 12% interest, 18% in other parts of the state. And on top of all the legal fees and all of that. So they're making a lot of money off of this. And it's a horrible way to do this. And so many people have lost their homes. So the mayor has stopped homeowners from going through tax sale. We have been working with, again, putting payment plans together so it's easier for people to pay their taxes. We are working on other ways to address this issue so that we are not working with third-party collectors, that the city collects, and that we are working with people anybody who doesn't want to pay their taxes, right? This is not about somebody trying not to pay their taxes. This is about residents, particularly during COVID, right? Particularly during COVID, when they had medical expenses or they needed to help a loved one. And so we're not able to pay the property taxes. So Mayor Scott, stopped, sending people through tax sale that were homeowners, and we're now working on payment plans and other things. So there's still a long way to go in that work. But it's really, really important. We've done a lot of work around the rental space as well. During the pandemic, we passed a law that landlords can't charge late fees, because everybody's checks were all messed up and everything else. We passed rental assistance and a security deposit bill so that people can pay security deposit to get into another place. So our council and our committee has really done a lot of work on all 3 fronts, from the vacant property side to keeping people in their homes and helping renters. But that's just not enough. There's so much more work to do. We need to increase the dollars for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We need to create tools for us to really focus on getting properties out the door and to partners who are going to do this work. So I've got a couple pieces of legislation coming, and be innovative about our housing issues, incentivize redevelopment in East and West Baltimore that need it most. Not every Black community is falling apart. I mean, Edna Gardens is a Black community and it's gorgeous. Ashburton, Black community, it's gorgeous. So we can't always stereotype, but in deep East and West Baltimore that have had significant disinvestment, we have to incentivize to make sure that that is reversed. So there's some ideas, some tax code ideas that I'm working on to try to deal with those incentives as well. So it all fits together in a nice puzzle. We have to take each puzzle piece one at a time to get it done, and then work towards the whole. So housing, though, is so important, and it's important because people. I don't know how you can have, take care of your health and other things without a home, right? And speaking of which, people experiencing homelessness has increased significantly in our city because of the eviction crisis and because there's not enough rental assistance, although we're working on it. But we do have the chronic homeless who've been out there on the streets for a long time. They may have mental health issues or substance abuse issues. We have a lot of money coming from the federal government to help with making sure that we're putting them on a track to housing and making sure that they've got the resources that they deserve. So that's really exciting and happening. So there's really a lot of aspects to it. The other piece on the vacant property side is that when you look at our violent crime in our city, it happens in the areas that have the most vacant properties. This is our crime fight. We have to address these properties for that the residents in that area can have a neighborhood that they are proud of and that we're addressing crime. So it's a multi-pronged approach that myself and others in our council are working through. It's very exciting that we're finally, addressing vacant properties. It's sad that one of the initiatives as to why we are is because 3 firefighters died in February in a vacant property, when we've had this crisis for a really long time. And I've been working with the families because they want to be involved to prevent this from ever happening again. So it's really now is the right time to be in Baltimore to be doing this, and it's exciting to be able to be in a place where we're working through it.
Yes, absolutely. You've provided a lot of great insight, and I've learned a lot about housing concerns through many of the courses that I've taken about the social dimensions of health. And you're right, because when you have adequate housing, when you have affordable housing, that transcends into every aspect of your life as a
Absolutely.
resident in the city, whether it's your health, whether it's your family, whether it's your job, where you work. Having adequate and affordable housing, it factors into how you live your life every day, and your outlook on how you live your life every day. And it does make sense when you say, and I've learned about this too, that the violent crime happens more in areas where there are vacant properties. And I think that oftentimes a lot of people don't take pride in where they live. A lot of people kind of take that for granted. I do know people who have strong community associations and strong homeowners associations who know how to get together and who know how to root out any of the problems that they have within the neighborhood. But it's a community effort, and it requires everyone to do their part. Because oftentimes people who who see vacant properties, they just kind of turn a deaf ear, and they don't really. A lot of people don't really have the education or the drive to really do something different, because it requires everyone. It can't just be done by one person.
Yeah,
It takes
I
it
want
takes
to
a
also
collective
add
village.
real quick. Yeah, I want to add also real quick that the trauma in Baltimore is rampant. Residents have a lot of trauma from whatever we're dealing with. And the science is there that one of the first steps towards healing is having a stable place to live. And that I think is critical. And we also know, going back to vacant properties, that if students are walking next to vacant properties on their way to school, the stress chemical, it's called cortisol, goes up, and it's going to block our young people from learning. They need to be ready to learn when they get to school, but if we're not providing them the right environment, then it's not going to happen, and that's not fair to them, right? So I mean, it's such a multi-pronged issue, that we have to tackle on all sides, and there are ways for residents to be involved. So residents can call if there's a vacant property next to them or near them. Call 311 or go on the app and make sure you're asking for a vacant building inspection, not just the high grass, not just the trash, but a vacant building inspection. What that does is it triggers an inspection of the property, and that property will get $1,000 fine. And you can do that every day so that there can be more fines put on that house. Two outcomes will happen. One, either the property owner will say, I'm going to sell this house because I can't do anything with it, or they will rehab it, or we can foreclose on it through this interim process and take possession and then work with communities about the outcomes that they want to see. And so this is a great way for residents to participate in this new process just by simply, going online or calling 311 and making sure you're asking for a vacant building inspection. And, keep track of the number, send it to your council person, or send it to me, and we can keep track. And this will work. We will be able to get some of those properties, back online in a little while. And I'm just excited about it, because as soon as the liens go above the value of the property, liens are unpaid taxes, unpaid citations, unpaid water bills, right? Then the city can foreclose through this in-rent process, and also have and also make sure that we have a dedicated docket in the courts, so that those cases are going through. So this is going to be a 9-month process. It's no longer going to take 2 years. It's no longer going to take 4 and 5 years. It's going to be quick, and the best way that residents can participate is to do those 311s.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for providing that information. Some of my listeners, they chimed in and they really appreciate the work that you all are doing in order to fix the, housing issues that are taking place right now. Because a lot of people have just a lot of people, I mean, home ownership, of course, it's a big step, but like a lot of people feel much more proud when they have stability. The stress, their level of stress um, depreciates, when they have stability and when they have, affordable housing. And like I said, I've learned about it through the social dimensions of health and through my studies. Having affordable housing, that means that you are in a healthier space physically, emotionally, financially.
Yep.
You have access to markets and stores that sell healthier foods. You don't have to worry about the fact that when you have stability at home, you're more likely than not going to be at a stable place of employment, or at a school. And even with your family structure, your family dynamics, it just factors into everything. So it's great that you guys have been able to do this work and that you guys are still making progress. So I was going to shift gears and ask you, who has mentored you throughout the course of the time that you've been in office, and how have you been garnering support from your family members and your close friends during your time in office? Because I know that because as a councilwoman, you have a lot of influence, and oftentimes I could imagine that it could be overwhelming at times, just being responsible for thousands and thousands of residents in the city. I mean, even though you're in local politics, you see your constituents every day. And how does that feel? And what kind of support have you been able to garner throughout this
Sure.
entire?
Well, I definitely couldn't do this without my husband. He has been great at taking care of our daughter, 10-year-old daughter, doing the pickup, making sure that she's got everything she needs. And I'm just so grateful for his support. I mean, for women running for office and being in office, it's a little bit different than men, right? Because we still take on a lot of the, maternal roles. And so I'm just so grateful that he's really stepped up there. I just couldn't do it without him. And I'm so grateful that he's supporting not just her, but also, knows that, there are times where I just, need an ear or need guidance, and he's been always there. So I do appreciate John for everything he does. Um, in terms of mentoring, my predecessor, Councilwoman Clark, has still always been my mentor. She will answer questions and go through things with me. And, so that's been wonderful. And we also have a network of other women like Delegate McIntosh and a few others in our district that have really supported each other through the years. And that's that network that supported me when I ran. When Mary Pat Clark said she wasn't going to run again, we already knew it was, I'm running and everybody's going to support. And so having that support network is extremely, extremely important for anybody, moving up. I'm also grateful that there's so many moms. I call them the mom squad, who will help take care of my daughter as well. Right before COVID, when I was door knocking and out all the time, I could drop her off and she'd have friends and they would take care of her. And then that was it. So, and now that we're coming out of COVID, we are doing that again. So it's just wonderful. I have so many people who, I have one particular constituent who's a friend of mine who, she sees me on TV and she's like, no, you got to wear something else, or no, that's not going to work. Because they actually they want me to look good and be well, so I do appreciate everybody's very frank discussions about, that kind of thing as well. So we can't do this alone. This isn't something we can do alone. And so I'm just so humbled every day by the people who support what we're doing.
Yes, and that's great, and it's very important to have support whenever you take a big step like this, and whenever you are stepping into any position that requires you to, be a leader of some sort, or if you're in a position of influence, it's very important to just have guidance and to have support, because you can't do everything and you can't be everywhere and you can't be everything for everyone. So it's great that you do have a support system. I think that, again, when you are in the position where you are able to use your influence, it's important to have a group of people in your corner, when things go well and when things don't go well. So it's really, really great that you have that support system. So what advice would you give young people who are interested in running for public office or pursuing a career in politics? Because, like I mentioned earlier in the show, I have a lot of my classmates who are pursuing, careers, in law, and who are interested in politics, and who do study sociology, like myself, of course, in different dimensions. And my second question is, what would you tell yourself now, well, your older self, I should say, the person that you were years ago when you were still, working under the leadership of Senator Barbara Mikulski, and when you were still going through that process before you got to where you are today? What would you tell yourself, and what would you tell young people who are apprehensive or who may not be sure about how they want to go about running for public office or being in a position of leadership, or just serving the community in any way?
Yeah. So to your first question, well, I'll take your second question first because it's in my mind. It's interesting. I hadn't actually thought about, what I would say, if I was mentoring a younger version of me. I think back then I was just, a whippersnapper trying to do everything and, taking initiative and all of that. I was still asking a lot of questions, and I always encourage young people to ask questions and not be worried about, oh, that's a stupid question. There aren't any stupid questions. And not, oh, I think the younger version of me, I think, was also worried about, what other people thought. And that is still important when you're in this work. But you have to be grounded in what you know and what you think is right. And then you don't have to worry about that, because in this work, you're going to make enemies. Not everybody's going to agree, but you have respect for you and everybody else. And really listen. You can ask a lot of questions, but you really need to listen to what people are saying, and understand what people are going through, at least as much as you can. And I think that not everything has to be in a rush. Everything doesn't have to be done today. I know it feels like it, but it doesn't have to. And to your other question, I did want to mention that you don't have to be a lawyer to do this work. I am not a lawyer. I did not go to law school. I have a master's degree in public policy from Rutgers University, and a bachelor's degree from Goucher College in social justice. So, a lot of people come to this work in different ways. We have one of our colleagues is in public health. She's not a lawyer. Another one of our colleagues, comes from just being a activist in, bikes. He's not a lawyer. We come to this work because of something that happened or that we're passionate about, and utilizing our skills and talents to get there. Sure, when we get here, you learn about the law, you learn about drafting legislation, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not a lawyer. But I am very familiar with legislation because I've done a lot of advocacy and lobbying. So if you're thinking about coming into this, it's really two things. You should get involved in your community immediately. Go to community meetings, do cleanups, get involved with neighbors, just as a way to really see what is going on and meet people where they are. Right. So getting involved in the community is very important. And then also think about, why is it that you want to run for office? Is it because you want to be famous? That's the wrong reason. That's the wrong reason. It is because you think of something that you want to change, that is you're passionate about, that's why you want to be there. I mean, well, I'd love to see, I love, Obama, and I would love to be Obama, right? And he's such a passionate speaker and orator, but I have to be doing what I'm doing because I'm passionate about it. And where am I going to be strategically to make that happen? When I first started thinking about running for office, I had to decide, I've done a lot in my career. Can I make better change from the outside pushing in, or from the inside? And, I've only been here 2 years, and I've been able to do a lot more than I think I've ever been able to do. And so that answer for me is I'm here, but that's not always the case for everybody else. So it's really, what is it that you want to see changed, and what is the best way to make that happen? Because the public office might not be the way, but you could do other things. Or maybe public office is the way, and you want to stay focused on that thing, because we get distracted on a lot of stuff. So the reason to run is because you're passionate about something, not just because you want to have your name up there, you want to have the fancy lights, you want to be in, in places where nobody else is. It's because you're passionate about something that you want to change and improve, and that's why you need to run.
Yes, absolutely. And I've heard that, from several of your colleagues and many of the people that that I've had the honor and privilege to work with, that, this is all about, you making a change, you making a difference in your community. It's not about, advancing your career, or just, putting yourself on a pedestal in order to enrich yourself or your lifestyle, or, whatever it is that you may have in your personal life. It's about, making a difference for others. And most of the time, our passions stem from many of the things that we may have experienced at some point in our lives, something that we see that it's a problem that we want to change for others. And that's what drives us. So your overall objective, in terms of why you want to run for office, or why you want that type of influence, it means a lot, because it becomes problematic for people when they forget their purpose, and when they forget their reason for why they do the work that they do. And that's what gets a lot of people into trouble. And that's when, oftentimes people just move in the opposite direction. And when people, when people are unable to work together anymore and find common ground and really focus on what really matters, that's when it becomes problematic. So we are in the middle of, an election season. So how can your residents, the city of Baltimore, and even the state of Maryland, how can people register to vote? And how can people participate in the gubernatorial election that's taking place right now? Because I've gone to several events with several community activists, and I've also been able to network with a lot of people, some of your colleagues and a lot of others who are in office, and I've been able to learn much more about, even working behind the scenes in Senator Cardin's office. I've learned a lot about that process at the federal level, and even through my network, I've been able to work with a lot of legislators at the local and state level. How can people register to vote during this election season, during the gubernatorial election, since we are in the middle of that process right now? So how can people get involved?
Yeah, sure. So in Maryland, anybody can register to vote on the day of election and also during early voting. So early voting lasts until Thursday this week, and then next Tuesday is election day. So you still have a chance to register to vote. The last day that you can request your ballot, if you were going to do a mail-in, is actually today. So if you haven't requested it yet, make a plan to go in person to vote. Voting is so important, and there have been a lot of improvements to our election system. If you've already voted and you're wondering what to do on election day, we still need election judges. Election judges are so important to make sure that the integrity of the election is exactly what it needs to be. There's a training. It is all day. It's a very long day, but you get to see your neighbors. You get to talk to people. You get to really make sure and be a part of democracy in action. So I hope you consider that as well. You do get paid. It's $200 for the day. A chief judge is 275, and you can go to the Baltimore City Board of Elections website to apply. Um, there's also still educating your residents and your neighbors about why it's important to vote, and how, I mean, this is a very important election. Even though we think that Westmore is going to run away with it, we actually need a very strong statement, because it's been very frustrating to see how the Republicans are couching how our elections are done and what they're planning on doing. And so it's very important to have representation that you trust, that's in your values. And frankly, I believe that, if you don't vote, you can't complain, because you had that opportunity. And voting is just so important. There are some ballot initiatives that are out there, and if you don't, have a sense of what those are, the League of Women Voters has an excellent voter guide, so that people can go through there and see, what which ballot initiatives and candidates to do. And when I'm at the polls just greeting people, it's great to see people with their sample ballot, because they've actually thought through who they're voting for and what they're doing, and so that's really great. So this is a really important election. Now, it's not our city council election. We are with the presidential. So in 2024 is when the mayor and council will be running. But many of us will be at the polls greeting voters, which we enjoy. And but there is definitely still time to register, because you can register day of, and also be an election judge. The ballot issues are really important. One of them that I sponsored, question I, is that independent inspector general. So I hope you consider voting for it. Question H is a little confusing, because it says we want to have a Baltimore Police Department. Well, we already have one. Right now, the Baltimore Police Department is actually an instrumentality of the state. And so this ballot initiative would allow it to be a city agency, and then we can make laws based on what we think the police department needs to do, because right now we can't do that. And then question K is very controversial. It's about term limits. Whatever you think about term limits, this is not the right proposal. So I'd encourage you to vote no. It's basically it says elected officials are term limited for 2 terms, and there's no staggered terms. So every 8 years, it's going to be total and complete chaos, because there isn't institutional memory. There's a lot of other details there, but you can certainly, look that up. So, it's a great time to get involved in our democracy. And actually, I want to thank you, Nelson, because, you are participating in our democracy by educating folks and having people on your show, so that people can make good decisions. And that's all part of it. So I really appreciate your help and your work in that.
Yes, and thank you very much, for taking time out to be a part of my show. You provided us with a lot of valuable insight and information in terms of the work that you do, and how people can really get involved. And I say it all the time. Every time I have a legislator on my show, I say it all the time that we as constituents, we have the power, and a lot of people don't realize how important their votes are, especially in when we from people who are a part of my community, I can definitely speak on that. A lot of our ancestors, made that sacrifice in order to make our voices matter, in order to, let our voices be heard in in these types of circumstances. So I always say that we have the power because everyone works for us. We are in the position to reach out to any of our legislators if we need anything, or if we see a problem, or if we want something resolved. We are always in the position to do that. And I always encourage everyone to just reach out to their legislators and to participate in community forums like you had mentioned, because I do it all the time. I reach out to my legislators all the time. If I have a problem with anything, if there's a community event, I'm very involved in all aspects. So I always encourage people to do that because it can be very intimidating for a lot of people to approach a legislator for an issue because of the type of influence a legislator does have. A lot of people feel intimidated, and I always encourage people to just not feel intimidated by a legislator because of a position, but just go to them about your concerns. Attend the forums. And voting, you feel so much more empowered. When you do vote and when you do cast your ballot, versus just leaving yourself out of the process and not being involved at all and not having a say in anything. Our perspectives matter. So that's why I always, I encourage people to vote and to really get involved in the legislative process at the local, state, and federal level, because it's important. All of these decisions affect all of us. So a lot of people, I always encourage people to, understand that. So thanks again for appearing on my show. I'm sorry you couldn't be in a studio.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but I do appreciate everybody's patience with me as we're trying to do in-person and hybrid and all of that. So, next time we'll be more prepared and make sure that we've got, the right background. But I appreciate your time and everybody's time here. And again, thank you so much for all you're doing to make sure that, residents have information that's really critical for them to be able to make good decisions.
Yes, absolutely. And how can people get in touch with you if they want to
Oh,
learn more
sure.
about your work?
Yes. So I can be reached on the email address is Odette, Odette, Ramos, Ramos. So it's Odette.Ramos at baltimorecity.gov. Our office phone number is 410-396-4814. And our offices are in City Hall. I don't have a district office yet, but we're working on it. Happy to come out and speak about, what we talked about today, or any other issues or concerns that people might have.
Thanks again, Councilwoman, for appearing on my show and providing a lot of valuable information to the listeners. And I look forward to speaking to you very soon.
Thank you again. Really appreciate it. Have a great night.
You too. Okay, so that wraps up another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. That was a fantastic show, you guys, and I'm glad some people were able to tune in, and I'm glad that you all were able to learn much more information about the Councilwoman and about the work that she does for the 14th District. And this is a very important election, and I'll say it again. I encourage everyone to vote during this election. Go in person, make time to really do your research, cast your vote, and make it count. Because again, we have the power as constituents. We are in the position to voice our concerns about issues that matter to us. So we are in the position to do that. So I encourage everyone to get involved at the state, local, and federal level. And I encourage everyone to reach out to their legislators and get involved in the community at forums and at events so that they can be a part of the process and so that they can be educated about what's taking place around them, because all of these decisions affect all of us. So I encourage everyone to, again, participate and to stay active in that regard. So next week on the Beauty in Us Radio, I have some more content, and I have a brand new show coming at you all next week on November 8th, 2022 from 6 to 7 p.m. And I reiterate, I'm going to be attending an event on Saturday with Mr. David Marshall, the CEO and founder of Journey to Josiah. He's having a gala performance. He's having a performance, for Adoption Awareness Month, National Adoption Awareness Month, and my mom and I are going to be participating, and we're going to participate in the event, and we are going to really, really enjoy the celebration, and we're going to enjoy that performance by Mr. David Marshall with all of the amazing guest speakers that he has in store. So we're going to celebrate National Adoption Awareness Month. So it's going to be from 6 to 10. We're going to be tired, but it's all going to be worth it. After we celebrate and after we, just come together as a community and celebrate adoptive families, adoptive children, adoptive parents, foster parents, foster children. It's going to be a wonderful event. So I'm looking forward to that. So make sure you subscribe to Awesome God Radio on YouTube. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all of the other social media outlets. And make sure that you reach out to me and follow me on Nelson at Nelson E. Brown on Twitter and on Instagram, and at Nelson Brown on LinkedIn and Facebook and all of our other social media outlets. This is the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I'm glad that you all were able to sit in for this fantastic show. I have more great shows in store for the remainder of the year, and I'm glad that we have been able to kick off November on a fresh start after a long and deserved hiatus on my end. So I love you guys. I appreciate you guys for your insight and for your input and for your comments and questions. And I encourage you all to continue to just get involved in your community and to participate in the process. It's never too late. Never be afraid to, reach out to your legislators, never be afraid to get involved, never be afraid to speak up for what's wrong and stand for what's right. So this is the Beauty in Us Radio on Awesome God Radio, and I will see you all next week. So make an appointment to meet me back here on November 8th, 2022 from 6 to 7 p.m. I love you guys, and I appreciate you guys, and I will see you all next week.